And society doesn't want man to be free.
Society does not want man
to be free, because freedom means, according to socials, freedom means disorder. Revolt means disorder. Revolution means disorder. So society says, forbids that. But man is always seeking freedom. But freedom merely outwardly, in relation to the social structure. Therefore, he is a revolt against society, but not a revolt against the inner psychological structure which has created this society. I don't know.
Yes.
Isn't that a brilliant thought? For someone like me who has been chasing freedom for all my life, from everything possible, from your 9 to 5s and your societal norms and traditions. See, these are the things that we externally see, but the true prison that you need freedom from is from your mind, right? When you look at Eastern philosophy, I find it very interesting that even though the philosophies in themselves are rich and full of ideas and brilliant insights into the human mind, they somehow always end up either becoming a religion or a cult. If you look at Osho or a Buddha, although he himself denies these worldly pleasures and he renounced all his titles, it still ended up becoming a religion. Vaishnavism turned into ISKCON. There are very few. I think this Advaita Vedanta, right, is the only one I can think of that did not end up becoming a cult. And maybe precisely because it operates at the metaphysical level instead of the leaders, professing that they are God men or expecting their followers to behave a certain way. Hinduism is interesting in that sense that it accepts all different kinds of viewpoints and that allows some amount of freedom and then again consequently prevents it from becoming a cult. But again, coming back to Jiddu, he operates at a level that is even higher, I believe, because he operates at the level of thought itself. He leaves very little room for debate, because when you say that your thought is the cause of any conflict, how do you argue against that? Most philosophies give you a blueprint on how to act, how to behave, how to think, right? Marcus Aurelius said that observe your feelings and you can control how you react to things. Camus teaches us to embrace irrationality and that there is no meaning to all of this. Nietzsche tells us to better ourselves and become the Ubermensch, as he calls it. Again, the broad point being that people are telling us what to do from time immemorial. But when JK tells us that your thoughts, if you look at it very actively, are the source of your conflict, when he says that observer is the observed, when you say that, oh, I am afraid or I am angry, what do I do? Well, no, that's the wrong way of looking at it. When you say that I am angry, it's not something that you need to suppress. When you observe it through the clarity at the depths of your mind and realize that that anger was caused by all the conditioning that you went through and some presumptions that you had since childhood, let's call them priors. When you look at that and when you realize that you are that anger, the conflict itself disappears. When you bring an argument like that, how does anything else ever come close to that? That's the end of the argument. You have reached the end of the road of philosophy when you make that argument, right? So I don't consider Jiddu Krishnamurti to be a philosopher or again some sort of messiah that will save us from all the evils of the world, but he is above all his peers, I believe, because his arguments are such. They are above the metaphysical level or the psychoanalytical level that Sartre and what's that other guy's name, Carl Jung, operate at. He's above all of that. This guy is talking about the absolute zenith of mind and how we perceive our reality. Let's take an example if this sounds too vague. And again, he gives this example in the book. Let's assume that you are sitting in front of a tree. What happens then? You tell yourself, this is a tree. You have lost there. What you are doing is that you are putting all your learning, all your historical knowledge of, again, let's say biology or how Earth is, or what plants are and what trees are, into your understanding of what is in front of you. You assigned it that value. You did that. Nature didn't do it. You assigned it. You called it a tree through language. That itself loses the meaning of the thing in front of you, doesn't it? When you look at the stars and you call, oh, this is, I don't know, Venus, and this is the sun, what are you doing then? Are you experiencing what you're seeing at that moment, or are you just pattern matching what you already know onto what you're seeing? Aren't you already living in the past when you are assigning things a name? You are assigning it what behaviors it can exhibit, right? You aren't taking in the moment, although that's what you'd like to believe, but clearly you already have some preconceived notions of what you are seeing and what the thing is, and you are just assigning it that value. And isn't that the source of conflict? He takes the example of relationships later in the book. And again, this is well known in, again, couples therapy, I would assume, that what you have in your mind is an image of your partner and not the partner itself. You expect him or her to behave a certain way, and when that doesn't match with what you have in your mind, that's the source of the conflict. How do you get to that person in that moment? Well, you have to observe and you have to reduce the space between what your mind is thinking and what that object is. In fact, he believes that you have to remove or disassociate your mind from things, not let it affect or color what you're looking at. That is the only way you will be truly living in the moment. Everything else is posturing, right? Remove all your expectations from how this person should behave and just look at what he or she is doing and accept it as is. And then there is wonderful joy, as he calls it. Let me read a quote that would demonstrate this beautifully. It's one of my favorite quotes. Quote, so if you can look at all things without allowing pleasure to creep in, at a face, a bird, the color of a sari, the beauty of a sheet of water shimmering in the sun, or anything that gives delight, if you can look at it without wanting the experience to be repeated, then there will be no pain, no fear, and therefore tremendous joy. End quote. And here, the tremendous joy is not our regular joy or happiness that we get after a party. He's not talking about that. It's just pure awareness that he is calling joy here. Here's another quote about the tree example I was giving earlier. Here, quote, have you ever experimented with looking at an objective thing like a tree without any of the associations, any of the knowledge you have acquired about it, without any prejudice, any judgment, any words forming a screen between you and the tree and preventing you from seeing it as it actually is? Try it and see what actually takes place when you observe the tree with all your being, with the totality of your energy. In that intensity, you will find that there is no observer at all. There is only attention. End quote. How interesting is that? I'm sure you have had this experience when there are these few fleeting moments, right? When you forget everything else about the world. You don't know what time it is, what day or what year it is. You are just in that moment, transfixed at what is in front of you. And those few moments of joy are the end goal of all of us. We all should aim to be in that state all the time. And that only comes when you remove your brain activity from interfering with what you are looking at, what you're observing. So very interesting again. I think this is a good point to jump into my notes. Ah, yes, here. Complex ideas don't survive simplification. I think that's one of my fatal flaws as well. I try to dump everything down in like few sentences to explain the concept better, but when I do that, I'm sure I'm missing out on a lot of the nuances and maybe sometimes even giving the opposite meaning out instead of what the author actually meant. So go read the book. I always tell people to go pick up a book, whatever book it is, and go into the depths of it instead of listening to reviews online. Because whatever I tell you, the book is a better version of that. So definitely go read the nuances. All right, we talked about the observer is the observed briefly, and here I think I was contrasting it with what Marcus Aurelius thinks, right? So when you say I am afraid, you somehow create this distance between you, the person, and someone who is afraid that you shouldn't be, right? You think, oh, I must control this feeling, or I must behave differently so that I don't become that person. So these are the thoughts that are running in your mind. And Marcus says that when you find yourself in such a situation, when you find yourself in times of trouble, what you should do is focus on the thing that you can control, right? That's his whole thing, where he will control the actions that are within your power to control. But JK flips this completely, right? He says that the thing that you are observing, which is your thoughts and your emotions, which is, let's say, fear, as in the case of I am afraid, you have to realize that that thing is your thoughts, your assumptions, your entire knowledge that is stored in your brain. That is what is creating that image that you are that, Tattvam Asi, right? You are that, and you are that anger. You cannot control it or do something in reaction to that because you are that person, and that awareness alone will resolve all conflict, right? When you take a step and look at the whole psychological structure that is causing you to be that way, when you are completely aware of all of these things at the same time in that moment, there is no longer any fear at all. You cannot be afraid because you know how that works now, right? Very interesting again. And that's why I said in the beginning also that you cannot bring any other theories that compete with this, because there is no argument to be made there. There has been a lot of talk about separating your self from your ego, from what you think, which is your mind and your thoughts, etc. But JK makes it very clear that when you observe things as they are and as a result of your conditioning, when you observe everything through that lens, there can be no conflict, because you realize again that conflict arises only when there is a mismatch between what you think should be, or what you imagined something to be, and how it actually is. But when you remove that filter of your knowledge, then you see things exactly as they are, and there is no conflict possible at that point. And this is true not only for emotions like fear or anger. It's true for your memories, your thoughts, your knowledge, what you believe to be true, your identity, more importantly. For example, I am a cis male belonging to this nationality, this religion, and these are the things that are my goals, and this is how I'm supposed to act. When you realize that all of that is just conditioning that, again, might be useful for a society to control, well, again, control is not the right word, but to, let's say, structure society in a certain manner, when you realize again that it's all in your head and none of that matters when you interact with anything else around you, then you are truly free. In fact, I was thinking of Mimetic Desires, right? By, I think the name is Rene Girard, something like that. He was this guy who, again, came up with this theory that we as people always look for things to do or things to want by looking at people around us in our peers and social circles. If Someone else buys a car, I also need to buy a car now. Someone is, again, this can apply to not only material things, but relationships, career goals. Everything is shaped by what you see other people around you doing. It didn't originate in your mind, right? You saw, and again, we are such creatures. Monkey see, monkey do. And when you realize again that your brain did not come up with it on your own, then you have to question, is that really necessary or important to me right now? Or am I just being influenced by other factors, so to say? Okay, let's move on to the broad topic of conditioning. The whole point of the book stems from the fact that the world we live in today, it's it's not good, to put it lightly. Even after thousands of years of political leaders, your priests, your teachers, your philosophers, your schools of thought, your religions telling you how to live, after all the mess that they have made, is it really fair that we still value them? Because the society that you are living in today is a result of all of that, right? It's a result of large hordes of people obeying a select few who claim to know the answer, who claim to be godmen, who claim to be powerful. Again, it's all because of that we are in this situation today. So we don't have any incentive to listen to them anymore because they don't know what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing. Take a good look at people around you, especially these godmen. Do you think they know what they're doing? They're chasing things. Again, for God knows what reason. There can be no sane, rational reason to their actions, and yet people believe them because, again, either they are in positions of authority or are associated to something that is sacred, like a religion or a temple, let's say. No one has any clue what they're doing. So why not just, fuck all of that? I'm going to deny my conditioning and I'm going to observe. Here's a quote that, again, from the book that I really liked. Quote, "For centuries we have been conditioned by nationality, caste, class, tradition, religion, language, education, literature, art, custom, convention, propaganda of all kinds, economic pressure, the food we eat, the climate we live in, our families, our friends, our experiences, every influence you can think of. And therefore our responses to every problem are conditioned." End quote. So how do you be free from this conditioning? By becoming aware. Very interesting. Again, do not fight this urge, do not become a rebel, that's not the point, but just observe. Salvation lies within, indeed. I wanted to end this section with another quote. Quote, "The question of whether or not there is a God or truth or reality, or whatever you like to call it, can never be answered by books, by priests, philosophers, or saviors. Nobody and nothing can answer the question but you yourself, and that is why you must know yourself. Immaturity lies only in total ignorance of the self. To understand yourself is the beginning of wisdom." End quote. How interesting, right? We always define ourselves with our nationality, our religion, caste, our job, our age. That's how we define ourselves. But do you really know who you are? Knowing or understanding yourself is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, let's tackle fear next. Let me begin with a quote. Again, incredible. Quote, "Do you know your own fears? Fear of losing your job, of not having enough food or money, or what your neighbors or the public think about you, or not being a success, of losing your position in society, of being despised or ridiculed, fear of pain and disease, of domination, of never knowing what love is or not being loved, of losing your wife or children, of death, of living in a world that is like death, of utter boredom, of not living up to the image others have built about you, of losing your faith, all these and immeasurable other fears. Do you know your own particular fears? And what do you usually do about them? You run away from them, don't you? Or invent ideas and images to cover them. But to run away from fear is only to increase it. End quote. That's the entirety of it, isn't it? Why are we afraid? We are afraid of the unknown. Anything that is uncertain, we suddenly feel this pang of, I don't know, something happens in your mind where you're not sure of what's going to happen, so that creates some tension within you. That's the whole of fear of anything, because you don't know what's going to happen. The fear of the unknown, the fear of an uncertain future. That is the root cause of fear, right? That's what Hamlet said as well. Quote, uh, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause, and there's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. Continuing later, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all. Ah, so again, we as humans act because we don't know what's going to happen, and we want to avoid that possibility altogether. So we may take evils that we know are bad or harmful to avoid something that we don't know. We will actively harm ourselves instead of taking a leap of faith into something that we don't know at all. So if you stop worrying about what's going to happen in the future or what already happened in the past, when you remove these two things, there is no fear. Maybe you suffered some heartbreaks in your earlier relationships. When you remove that memory, when you remove that conditioning, then you will be able to live in the present without fear, right? Of falling into love again. There is no other way to conquer fear but to remove these presuppositions that we have and take every moment as a new one. Now, you might argue that this is a dumb thing to do because maybe you don't want to be stung by the snake again. Those lessons were there in the past for a reason. The child, after touching a hot stove once, won't do it again because that's the lesson he got. What do you mean, forget about that? Well, his mind or his actions are already changed after that incident, right? Who you are has changed after that incident has passed. Only the memory remains, which serves no purpose. We instinctively won't commit the same mistakes again because we have learned the lessons from the loss we suffered because of our mistakes in our previous experience. So we as a person have changed. We are never one constant person who is trying to learn from previous mistakes, right? That's again another point that JK makes. We are never one single thing at all times. We change through our experiences, through our thoughts, and at every different moment, we are a different person. And that's how a person develops over time. So you have to embrace the change. That's the only way to move forward and remove fear from your life. Let's jump to freedom next. And now we are going into some dangerous territory. And again, the argument itself is quite dangerous, as I just explained. Because when you say forget everything from your past, what exactly will that entail? Is such a life even possible? Who we are is our past experiences and how they shaped us up to be, isn't it? But here's a quote: freedom from the known is death, and then you are living. So JK makes the case for the argument that you die every day. You should die every day. And every other morning when you wake up, you have to be born new. Look at it as if everything is new to you. And this again goes back to what a child does. And again, in popular culture, this is well known. A child is the only one who is truly free because, let's say, he doesn't have object permanence, and he sees everything as if for the first time, right? When he looks at a person, when he looks at the stars, when he looks at a plant, when he looks at fishes, it's impossible for a child not to be excited by all of that all the time, because he doesn't have a conception of what that thing is, and that sense fills him with this wonder that cannot be matched by any of our adults. So, what does it truly mean to become a child again? It means to disconnect or completely deny your mind access to old experiences. Forget your past, absolutely. Stop worrying about the future, absolutely. If you are happy, or if you are content, if you're satisfied in the present moment, not 5 minutes ago, or not after you attain this goal next week, no. In the present moment, are you happy right now? That's all matters. If you can manage that, then there is no fear. There is only freedom, there is only wonder that comes from recognizing your position or place in the world, and everything becomes wondrous at that point. I want to do this experiment. Look around you and experience that thing as is, not with what you know about it already or what you expect it to be. No, what's in front of you right now? Look at it, pick it up, and appreciate it in the moment. Isn't it beautiful? I have this glass in front of me. It's reflecting some light from the window next to me. How wondrous is that? I can see my hands through it. How wondrous is the science and physics that goes behind all the materials, the making, the manufacturing process, the molecules in it? Isn't it wondrous that something exists in front of me than nothing? And I don't have to assign it a name, although I just called it a glass, but that was just to explain to you what I was looking at. But it's so wondrous that I can experience this moment right now as is. And if I live every moment like this, it's every moment is worth living 1,000 times over. And it's like discovering something new at every moment. And that's the goal of life in its entirety. That's all there is. There is no greater meaning to be attained or a goal to be sought after. This moment is all you've got. Okay, let's move on to meditation. I didn't make any notes on that, but there's a great quote that I want to get into, and it flows right into this conversation of being in the moment, right? That's what all these meditation gurus tell us. But again, JK being JK, destroys all of that so brilliantly. And I especially want to focus on this one thing that we do, which is mantras, right? Where we repeat a single word or a phrase over and over again. Here's a quote on that. Quote, all this is utterly mechanical. Another method gives you a certain word and tells you that if you go on repeating it, you will have some extraordinary transcendental experience. This is sheer nonsense. It is a form of self-hypnosis. By repeating Amen or Om or Coca-Cola indefinitely, you will obviously have a certain experience, because by repetition, the mind becomes quiet. It is a well-known phenomenon which has been practiced for thousands of years in India. Mantra yoga, it is called. By repetition, you can induce the mind to be gentle and soft, but it is still a petty, shoddy little mind. You might as well put a piece of stick you have picked up in the garden on the mantelpiece and give it a flower every day. In a month, you will be worshipping it, and not to put a flower in front of it will become a sin. End quote. That was the funniest thing I read all week. So here he makes the important distinction between taming the mind and disconnecting the mind, right? We can do all of these breathing techniques or hard exercises to somehow tame our mind or make it behave in a certain way, but it is still there and it is still producing thoughts. That is its purpose. Only when we completely detach and disengage from it can we truly be present in the moment. If you listen to Osho, You must be familiar with this idea. Again, he also espouses very similar beliefs. All right, let's jump on to love. It's a classic topic that everyone talks about, and I don't know how many movies and books need to tell us that love is the answer, but this book also does. So I have some points on it. Responsibility, duty, desire, pleasure, sentiment, dependence, jealousy, and practice are not love. Did you focus on the not there? All of these are not love. How very interesting. Again, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but somehow we have this very weird idea of love that when we, I don't know, depend on someone else for something, then that is love. Or if he protects me from someone, then that is love. Or if it's someone's duty to, I don't know, be with me, then that is love. Or if I find pleasure in someone's company, then that is love. But again, JK makes the point that these attributes have their own individual value, but why do you have to associate all of this with love? Love is not something that you attach to dependence or to practice. If you have lived together for 5 years and then you use that as a reason or you call that love, JK again makes it very clear that that's just practice and it is not love. What is love? Love is in recognizing beauty. Love is passion from the heart, devoid of everything else. So again, very interesting that instead of you adding these extra things and calling it love, you have to recognize that love comes only from the bottom of your heart. Everything else is something different. If you call lust or desire or again pleasure love, you are wrong. That is just that in itself. Love is a passion that comes from the heart, and nothing else is mixed with it. It's maybe one of the purest feelings that one can experience. So stop associating love with any of these other things. And not, it's definitely not relationships for sure. So, okay, I hope I made that clear. I think we can conclude this review by saying that when you observe a thing for what it is, then all conflict will disappear. That's as simple as I can make it. Here's a quote to end the review with. Quote, "We want to be told. One of the most curious things in the structure of our psyche is that we all want to be told because we are the result of the propaganda of 10,000 years. We want to have our thinking confirmed and corroborated by another, whereas to ask a question is to ask it of yourself. What I say has very little value. You will forget it the moment you shut this book, or you will remember and repeat certain phrases, or you will compare what you have read here with some other book, but you will not face your own life. And that is all that matters. Your life, yourself, your pettiness, your shallowness, your brutality, your violence, your greed, your ambition, your daily agony and endless sorrow. That is what you have to understand, and nobody on earth or in heaven is going to save you from it but yourself." End quote. So stop looking for answers from priests and philosophers and teachers and politicians. You have to answer your own questions. No one else is coming to save you, unfortunately. Thank you for listening.